From conversations to relationships, engaging teens in permanency planning.
Welcome. We'll get started in 1 minute. We're going to give a little bit of time for everyone to get admitted into the webinar.
Blonde Erin Bader appears briefly in the upper right corner of the screen, which includes a slide featuring the webinar title and photos of 5 smiling teens. Children's Bureau and Child Welfare Information Gateway appear with logos at the bottom of the graphic. Erin reappears.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, From Conversations to Relationships, Engaging Teens in Permanency Planning. Before we get started, we just wanted to take note of a few housekeeping items. As you probably already know, you are all attendees are on mute, but we encourage you to engage with us through the chat feature. But please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions for our presenters. We will have time at the end to go through those, and it's just easier for us to be able to kind of quickly pull your questions out from the Q&A spot. Lastly, the PowerPoint of today, and there will be a supplemental handout, will be sent out via email following the webinar, so be on the lookout for that. As well as the recording of today's webinar will be shared to the National Adoption Month website. Okay, I would now like to hand it off to June Dorne, the National Adoption Specialist with the Children's Bureau.
Thank you so much, Erin. And I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone today. Thank you for joining us for this webinar, which continues our focus on our National Adoption Month theme regarding engaging teens in authentic and meaningful conversations. I trust that today you will hear something that you will be able to put to practical use in your own work with teens. I want to thank Erin Bader and Jen Vidrine of the Child Welfare Information Gateway for organizing this webinar. And I want to say a big thanks to all of our adoption-related grantees that will be presenting today. You will hear from Adopt US Kids, that's with the National Adoption Association, and from the National Adoption Competency Mental Health Training Initiative with the Center for Adoption Support and Education. You will also hear from our National Training and Development Curriculum Program and our Quality Improvement Center for Adoption and Guardianship, both of whom are with Spalding for Children. All of these grants have a national scope, and they've had a very deep and meaningful impact on a national basis in building the capacity of states in the work in their child welfare systems. And today they will be sharing particular elements of their programs that relate to our National Adoption Month theme on engaging you.
Please note, all grants were one-time funding opportunities for selected demonstrations.
Back to Erin Bader.
Erin Bader, Strategic Consultant, Child Welfare Information Gateway.
As we prepare to recognize National Adoption Month in November, I wanted to share with you the National Adoption Month website. We will put the link in the chat for easy reference. This year's National Adoption Month theme is Every Conversation Matters, and the website features resources that will help professionals understand how to partner with young people and integrate youth voice in permanency planning. I also want to invite you to the National Adoption Month event, which will be webcast nationally on November 9th at 12 p.m. noon. We will also place the registration link for this event in the chat. Okay, now let's get started with the presentations. I would like to hand it off to Bob Hearn, National Project Director with Adopt US Kids.
Thanks, Erin. And again, yes, I'm Bob Hearn, National Project Director at Adopt US Kids. I'm very glad to be here with all of you today. Can we have the next slide, please?
Mission.
Adopt US Kids has a cooperative agreement with the Children's Bureau to raise public awareness of the need for foster and adoptive families and to assist our states, territories, and tribes in the recruitment, engagement, development, and support of foster and adoptive families. Today, I'm briefly going to discuss two of our services that highlight the importance of youth engagement and permanency work, and to offer some tools and support that might assist you in developing your engagement of youth. Next slide, please.
Family Funding
The
Initiative.
first project was when Adopt US Kids received supplemental funds to replicate 4 models of family finding that showed promise across the country: extreme recruitment, in-depth profiles, the I Belong project, and the family engagement approach to permanency. Although all 4 models took different approaches, the key factor in the success for each model was their ability to engage and develop a relationship with the youth in their permanency planning. For example, with the in-depth profile model, the youth takes the lead. The project begins with 2 simple questions posed to the youth. Who do you want to be involved, and what do you want to share? This empowers the youth to determine what is important to them and how their information is going to be presented. This process has led to a variety of profiles that varied from a cooking show to a youth introducing you to their book and to a blog. Because the youth are in charge, they are proud of the finished product and want to share it with others. Workers get to spend quality time with the youth in active listening mode, and they have an ability to build a solid relationship as they learn more about the youth. In our evaluation, all of the participants involved in the project stated that the youth felt empowered and good about the work that had been created. The other model I want to highlight is the family engagement approach to permanency that partners with an agency in finding connection and permanency for youth in foster care. The uniqueness of this model is that it starts at the systems change level by recognizing that adding a new program without the pre-work of aligning it to the agency will run into multiple barriers. It starts by bringing in leadership to review the values of the organization and then to implement strategies and services that align with those values. As the counties involved in the project recognized that youth engagement was a core value of the agency, they began to develop their practice that supported this value and integrated it into their systems. The evaluations of this project indicated that staff were excited to align their values with the services and practices they were offering. Next slide, please.
A photo of an iceberg.
So this brings us to the iceberg on the slide. When you discuss a topic like family finding, many start by looking at the practical tasks, such as we need to review the files to determine those people who were previously involved in the youth's life, and we need to access a search engine to find those folks. While those tasks are important, the majority of the work that occurs in successful family finding has been found to be at the engagement level that happens underneath. That building of a strong relationship with the youth and those who are interested in connecting and reconnecting, and then the ability to transfer those relationships are the key to success. Next slide, please. The next project I'd like to highlight today is our National Speakers Bureau. The Speaker Bureau recruits, trains, and promotes family and young people with lived experience to help raise public awareness of the need for foster and adoptive families and to assist in improvements to our child welfare system. We accomplish this by having our speakers share their personal experiences and perspectives. Currently, we have over 100 speakers from across the nation who have been trained to develop their public speaking skills and have learned how to tell their story in an effective and safe manner. Research shows that prospective families want to hear from other families who have been involved in the child welfare system and youth with lived experience. The youth want to hear from other youth, and the child welfare system can improve when they listen and implement change based on the needs of youth and families. Next slide, please.
Photos from various events.
Our youth participate at both the national and local level. From the pictures on the slide, you can see that these opportunities range from TV and radio interviews to webinars and panels to conferences and trainings. A major theme for our youth speakers over the past 2 years has been in supporting youth engagement efforts. Our Speakers Bureau is successful due to the ongoing maintained relationships that we have built. We are committed to our youth and support them in several ways, including ongoing media and public speaking training, opportunities where they can connect with other youth with lived experience, and access to one-to-one support when necessary. We work together as a team when working on a project and remind them that they can always turn down an opportunity if they don't feel comfortable. And we remind them of the importance of telling their story and how to redirect when asked uncomfortable or inappropriate questions. Next slide, please.
Benefits to youth.
What you might not think about when developing a speakers bureau is the benefit it brings to the participants. Our youth consistently let us know they appreciate being connected to other youth that have had similar experiences of being adopted as a teen. They love the opportunity to connect and to go on activities and participate together as a group. They love the relationships that they've built across the country with other youth. Additionally, our youth and families have stated how they have become a stronger family by participating in the project. As you see on the slide, the Arnstons stated, it provided our family with an opportunity to have conversations on topics we hadn't discussed before and strengthened us as a family. The key themes to our National Speakers Bureau are empowering the youth to tell their story, supporting them to be successful, the giving of our time, and having opportunities for our youth to connect with other youth. We would like to be here to assist you in your efforts. So please contact us if you would like more information on the Family Finding Initiative, or if you'd like to be connected to one of the 4 purveyors. We have developed a speaker's guide and a media toolkit. Our team is available to assist you if you're interested in developing your own speakers bureau, or please contact us if you'd like to refer a youth who you might think might be interested in joining our National Speakers Bureau. So I'd like to thank you for your time today. And at this time, I'd like to pass the presentation over to my colleague, Melinda Liss.
National Training and Development Curriculum, NTDC.
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're located. We'll go on to the next slide, Jenny. So my name is Melinda Liss, and I'm sure some of you have heard this spiel before, so it's going to be short in regards to backdrop, and we'll move straight on in regards to how this relates to teens. But I direct the National Training and Development Curriculum for Foster Adoptive Parents, which I will refer to as NTDC throughout this presentation. And I work for an agency called Spalding for Children out of Detroit. So on the next slide, you'll see the NTDC goal.
A photo of a family.
And I think you got to click one more time, Jenny, on this one. So this, I won't list this out for you, but if you haven't heard of this, this is a federally funded project that is really intended to work to provide families with the information that they need at the start of the journey when they're making the decision to become a foster adoptive parent, and to provide them with ongoing skill development throughout that journey. Because we all know this is not a one-time training, right? This is an ongoing learning that has to happen. And so we wanted to have a very comprehensive curriculum for families that provides them with information that's very important when you're caring for kids who face adversity. So knowing about trauma, separation, grief and loss, and other topics that we've identified is really the goal of NTDC. I will talk about it later, but if you haven't heard, it is free and will be available to everybody in the spring of 2022, which is just coming up. So on the next slide, we talk about the target audience. This particular program is, or curriculum, is geared primarily for child welfare, people who want to foster adopt through the child welfare system. However, we have adapted the information so that it's also pertinent to kinship caregivers. We've also adapted the information so it's pertinent to American Indian, Alaskan Native foster and adoptive parents. And lastly, for families who want to adopt via the intercountry or private domestic adoption process. On our next slide, we show the pilot sites. And this one, Jenny, you'll have to click throughout.
Labels appear on a map. Florida, Missouri, Georgia, Oklahoma, Illinois, Colorado, Salt River, Pima, Maricopa, Indian Community, and Kansas.
These sites have agreed to pilot the curriculum, have implemented NTDC into part of their system, not throughout their whole system, because we're doing a very comprehensive evaluation to determine whether or not NTDC is meeting the outcomes that we've stated. So every site that's on here is currently implementing NTDC. When we finish with the evaluation, we will have one of the largest comprehensive evaluations on a curriculum that's designed for families who want to become foster adoptive parents. We are going to be moving this curriculum through the evidence-based process. So our hope is that through all of the evaluation we do, we can get there. In addition to the sites that are listed on this map, we also have some sites that are already implementing NTDC They're not part of the pilot, but they're a different phase for us, and that is the Virgin Islands and Maine. And then in addition, we are currently onboarding Oregon and Texas. So if you are not one of those sites and you're interested in becoming a site, we will talk about that at the very end as how you can go about doing that, because now is the time. So on the next slide, we give you a graphic that shows what this curriculum is. I'm not going to go into detail about it today, but in general, when we talk about Ntdc, there are three components that we talk about. The first component are the triangles that you see on the slide. So that's called self-assessment. We have a self-assessment that's taken prior to families starting their class, and then we have one that's done after they're finished with their classroom-based training. This self-assessment is something families do on their own, and it's geared around characteristics that have been shown through research to be applicable to families who are successful at fostering and adopting. So we want families to go through this assessment on their own, figure out where their skills are, where maybe they have some areas they could improve on, come to class, and then the class is going to reiterate those characteristics. We've woven them throughout all of our themes so they can learn more about those individual characteristics and how to enhance them. They then take the self-assessment again after the training is over, and there they get to learn how they've grown, as well as to help them with ongoing learning, because again, we emphasize throughout our training, it's about lifelong learning. The second component, which is on the top of the slide, is classroom-based training. There are 23 themes in total. All of them are content related. So one is on attachment, one's on separation, grief, and loss, et cetera, et cetera. Of the 23, 2 of them are online, meaning you don't need a facilitator. There are also 4 that are specifically related to a target audience. So in general, there are 17 that are geared for child welfare that require a facilitator. All of these are very dynamic. They include podcasts, video clips, tools, discussions, articles, various things to really bring the information to light and allow families to not only learn it through lecture, but practice it and discuss it and actually start to see how it impacts their current life. And then on the bottom, we have the right time training, which is ongoing training that we have available to families that they can access 24/7 anytime they want to. And there are 15 themes, and all of those right times training include videos and podcasts and questions and answers and numerous things to really bring that information to life.
Ntdc Foundation.
On the next slide, we just talk about the 3 things. There are many things I could tell you about Ntdc, but I wanted to highlight 3 things that are foundational to this curriculum, and I think what makes it different. The first thing I would say on the box, which is to your far left, yes, is really about the child's connections to their family of origin, as well as to whoever else they put into their bucket called family. And we really stress throughout the curriculum that that is very important, and that we want parents to understand that caring for a child, either through foster care or adoption, involves knowing, honoring, and respecting the fact that they have family, that they have people who are in their bucket called family, and we want them to know how to do that and why it's important. The middle thing here is really about the idea that all of this is relational focused, right? And families are the ones caring for these kids 24/7. So we need to provide them with the skills and tools that they need so they can really help children through the journey so that they can be in a place where they're healthy and functioning well. And so we focus a lot on those core themes that we've talked about: trauma, separation, grief, and loss, attachment, how to communicate with children, and other things that are really going to help them understand how to do this work, why they need to change their parenting paradigm, etc. And then lastly, on the far box to the right, we talk a lot about lifelong learning. One of our foster parent trainers says, you go to college not to learn everything you possibly can. You go to college so you can learn how to get information. You can learn some basic tools about how to get information and know where to go. Ntdc is the same way. We want to provide parents with the most important information they need at the beginning of the journey. And then we want to make sure they know where to go back and they have a place to go back to get ongoing information for ongoing skill development.
How Ntdc addresses issues related to teens.
Is going to talk about how Ntdc is specific to teens, which is our topic today. So this is the first thing I would say is that it is a foundational curriculum. So it's going to provide parents with the information that they really need and the tools to be able to care for children who've experienced any type of adversity. That's really important because we all know if you have teens, but if you get to the teen years, everything amplifies. And so we want to make sure they have a really strong foundation. However, we do have areas that we do focus on. So I've listed them here, like child development. We go through all of the ages and all of the stages and talk about the developmental milestones. We have a right time training that's specific on preparing for adulthood. So of course, that's going to focus more on the teen years. We have a classroom theme on the impact of substance use. And that one's really going to focus on how impact of substance impacts children throughout their whole life. But certainly, if you know anything about this topic, when you get to the early adolescent years, things ramp up quite a bit for kids who've been exposed to substance. So we want to really give them the tools about what that looks like, how to get help for it, and how children will display behaviors through that. And then sexual development and identity. We certainly focus on sexual development and identity throughout the years, but we look at, of course, focusing on those adolescent years. Separation, grief, and loss, same thing. We focus on what that looks like across a child's life, but certainly focus on it through the teens years. The next slide, which is my second to last.
Continuum of consistent training.
You're going to hear from Dawn right after me. And if you haven't been aware of these three curriculum, they really do provide a consistent continuum of training, which I hear so often from numerous places that they need for their families, that they want. And it's all here and available to you. And the best part about it, it's all been created by the federal government and it's all free. And so you can get the Ntdc to really give that cornerstone families need. Core Teen is another curriculum that's been created by many of the same partners that is going to give you the information that is specific to the teen years, but it's going to be done in the same messaging that you see in Ntdc. And then NTI, which Dawn will talk about, so I won't steal her light. She's going to focus on that training and how it ties into this as well. And so you then have a continuum of training that you can give to your families and even to staff that really go throughout the entire continuum of the child welfare system. So on the last slide, I would say that I would really encourage you, if you haven't done it, please check out the website for Ntdc. It's listed here, ntdcportal.org. My information is up here.
mlis@spalding.org.
Now, so although this is not going to be publicly available till the spring, we are starting to onboard sites as we talk. So if this is something that you're interested in getting more information about, you want to have this core competency for your families, please call us.
947-224-1656.
On our website when you go there that are specific to teens. We have something from Heather Forbes on effective communication with teens, something from Dr. Bruce Perry on parallel play, and a couple other videos that are specific to working with teens. And you can find all of those on the website under sample curriculum and then samples. So I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much. I am now going to turn it over to Dawn.
National Adoption Competency Mental Health Training Initiative, NTI.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk, well, first of all, I'm the director of the National Training Institute at the Center for Adoption Support and Education, or CASE, and I'm going to talk to you today about the National Adoption Competency Mental Health Training Initiative, or NTI. Next slide. And I'm going to share with you some of the ways in which this NTI training supports youth engagement and permanency planning. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with NTI, it is a free web-based curriculum. We have a curriculum for child welfare professionals and one for mental health professionals that is focused on helping to build the capacity of those professionals to understand and effectively address the mental health and other challenges that children, youth, and their foster, adoptive, and guardianship families experience. So next slide.
Focus of NTI is on youth understanding their unique story.
NTI is based on, or sort of undergirded by, a number of guiding principles. And I've highlighted three here that I think really reinforce sort of the focus on why it is so important for us to do good work with youth to help them to understand their own story. In order to heal from loss and trauma, and then be able to really be ready for their permanent family. So the first one is loss is at the heart of every adoption. Knowing what happened matters, and youth process their story through a developmental lens. And I think what I want to sort of share with you is that our belief is that it's the worker's job to facilitate this understanding with youth and their families through truth telling, through providing timely information, updating information and helping youth to really understand their unique story. So we want workers to understand what they need to do and how they can go about explaining the powerful impact of loss and grief for youth. We provide information on how youth can receive and understand information, particularly at various developmental stages. We provide tools to engage youth in telling and understanding their story, and I'm going to share a couple of those in a minute. We emphasize the need for workers to initiate conversation with youth. And I think it's really important for us to remember that just because youth may not be talking about openly their thoughts and feelings doesn't mean they don't have them. And sometimes we need to be the ones to initiate those conversations so that youth know that they have a safe emotional space to discuss their thoughts and feelings. And then the other thing that our training does is it promotes communicative openness with parents and caregivers so that youth can discuss their thoughts and feelings again in a way and in a place that's safe for them emotionally. Next slide.
Tools to engage youth in understanding their story.
So we cover in our curriculum lots of different tools and resources. And I've highlighted here some of the resources that we provide information about that can help you engage youth to understand and tell their story. And as I mentioned before, we believe this is really a foundational aspect of the work that we do in child welfare. So one example would be storyboarding. This is a way for youth to creatively tell their story or some aspect of their story. We provide a resource called Storyboard that you can access on your computer to help create storyboards. We talk about digital stories, another creative way for youth to tell their story that can be used with a cell phone camera or a video camera. We talk about things like timelines, genograms, ecomaps, and how those can provide really nice visual depictions of what has happened in youth's lives, help them to sort of understand, what they've experienced throughout their life. Of course, we talk about life books, and most of you are familiar with life books, but this can be a really essential tool to help youth, not just young children, but youth of all ages, to really understand their story. And then the other thing is that we also talk about things like using books and movies and current events to spark conversation with youth. You don't have to wait for a particular time and place that, something that happens in the news might be an opportunity for you to have conversation with a young person about what they're experiencing in their own life. And so we provide lots of examples of ways to do that. Next slide.
Tools to assess attachment in teens.
This is an example of one particular tool that we share that's particular for older youth. And it is around assessing sort of attachment and the strength of relationships that people have with different people in their lives. And so this is a tool that was created by Vera Fahlberg, whose job was it? And through conversation, you can explore who in the child's birth family or in their previous placements or in their current family serves the various functions by asking questions like, who provided you with food? And when you needed new clothes, who provided those for you? And who took you to the doctor, et cetera. And this gives you sort of an understanding of who those important people were at different points in this child's life. And then this can also help you to sort of have a better understanding of who you might want to help the youth then maintain those connections with as long as it's certainly safe and possible. But that's one of the sort of the concepts of this training is we want youth to understand their story. We want them to maintain connections with people who are important to them. And this is a tool that can help us to do that.
Tools to help teens connect trauma to behavior and strategies to support them.
So we know how important education is, both for youth and caregivers, to understand why they may be experiencing the challenges that they're having. And so we provide a number of different tools, and we have on the screen, I think, 2 here.
NCTSN article on age-related reactions to traumatic stress and what is complex trauma, a resource guide for youth and those who care about them.
To help them gain a better understanding about what they might be experiencing, and also to learn strategies to cope or strategies to support their youth through the development of their coping skills. We call this psychoeducation, right? This idea that we help to educate the people in the life of the youth but the youth as well, about what they're experiencing. And these are some tools, and we have a whole bunch of other tools available in this curriculum as well.
Tools to support older
Next
youth
slide.
preparing for transracial families.
In our module on race and diversity, we address a number of challenges that many families experience, but particularly transracial and transcultural families. And this is an example of an activity that's recommended by Dr. Joseph Crumley, who's one of the experts that we include in our training. And it's to help prepare youth for a transracial placement. And so he suggests a series of questions that you can encourage youth to ask to make sure that they will feel accepted and supported in their new family. And so these are just some examples on the screen of some of the questions that they can ask. And again, part of our job is to create the safe space for youth to really be able to talk about their feelings and their thoughts about their current situation, their birth family, the losses they've experienced. And this is one tool for doing that.
Supervisor coaching
Next
and activity
slide.
guide to support staff to use new
And then
skills.
finally, I also want to say that in addition to supporting workers directly with our training and our tools and resources, we have, as part of our child welfare professionals curriculum, additional lessons that supervisors can take. And also resources like the supervisor coaching and activity guide that can provide activities to help supervisors support their staff to use the skills they learn in NTI in their daily work. So one example is an activity where, for instance, supervisors can ask their workers to try one of the new tools that we mentioned earlier, storyboarding, digital stories, timelines, whatever, with one of the children on their caseload, and then come back in supervision and talk about how that worked for them. What were the issues that arose for the child. So this is one example of then not just for workers, but how we're helping to support supervisors to continue to help build the skills of their workers as well. And next slide.
Don Wilson, MSW.
So as Melinda mentioned, and thank you for the plug, Melinda, NTI is free training. It is available for workers across the country right now via the CapLearn Online Training Center. And we also are still working with state systems to help them integrate this training into their own training systems. And we have about 26 states right now that are using NTI with their child welfare staff. And if you're not one of those states, if you work with the state system and you would like to have a conversation about how to bring NTI into your system, we would love to have a conversation about that. And I would encourage you to please email me.
Wilson@adoptionsupport.org.
And then also, if you want additional information about NTI, you can certainly go to our website as well.
Adoptionsupport.org/NTI.
We're really excited. We've had about 17,000 professionals across the country so far participate in NTI training, and we want hopefully this to be a standard training for all child welfare professionals across the country. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Leslie Cohen.
National Quality Improvement Center for Adoption and Guardianship Support and Preservation,
Jen,
QIC-AG.
Slide with a map on it.
A map of the U.S.
So hello, everybody. My name is Leslie Cohen. I'm the project director for the National Quality Improvement Center for Adoption and Guardianship Support and Preservation, otherwise and more concisely known as the QIC-AG. Engaging and supporting youth is critical during permanency planning, but to help sustain the permanency, it's really important that the engagement of youth continue after adoption and guardianship has been achieved. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how the work of the QIC was in support of that belief. So the QIC-AG was a 5-year project that worked with 8 pilot sites identified in blue to implement evidence-based interventions or to develop and test promising practices, some of those strictly youth-focused, and to provide tools for replication and adaptation of effective interventions that support 2 very specific target populations. One, children and families who've already finalized their adoption or guardianship, and the second population being children with challenging mental health, emotional or behavioral issues who are awaiting an adoptive or guardianship placement, as well as children in identified adoptive and guardianship homes, but for whatever reason, the placement has not resulted in finalization for a specific period of time.
Tuning into Teens, TINT.
So on the next slide, we're going to talk about one site that was particularly focused on youth. And New Jersey specifically focused on implementing an intervention geared towards minimizing permanency and stability for youth by making sure that parents and caregivers are prepared to support healthy relationships with the youth in their care. And the intervention that they chose to implement is called Tuning into Teens, otherwise known as Tint. So I'm going to talk about why the intervention was chosen, what it does, and how you can learn more about implementation if you become interested as a result of today's presentation. So Tint, developed at the University of Melbourne in Australia, was chosen because it addressed a primary need that was uncovered by New Jersey during the identify and explore stage of implementation. That's when you figure out like what your target population is and what needs to be addressed and all that good stuff. So in keeping with much of the research, New Jersey found that in their state, a child's age really impacted adoption and guardianship stability. Children who were older when finalization occurred were at a higher risk for discontinuity, and the likelihood of discontinuity increased as the child got older, meaning simply that children in their teens were at higher risk for discontinuity than younger children. New Jersey found that discontinuity spiked when children who had achieved permanence were around 13, 14 years old. So they specifically chose to target the work with their caregivers who had children between the ages of 10 and 13 and who were receiving an adoption or guardianship subsidy and met one of two criteria. At the time of the finalization, they were between the ages of 6 and 13 or in group care while in foster care. After examining the target population, they concluded that there are clearly developmental tasks in adolescence that are often complicated by adoption and guardianship, and that families might quite simply be unprepared to address the unique challenges that were coming to light in a child's teen years. So bottom line, New Jersey wanted an intervention that would develop the skills of parents and caregivers so that those parents in turn could support and meet the needs of their teens, keeping the youth engaged and the conversations going without straining the relationships, or at least minimizing the strain that often comes in those teen years. So no small task to find that intervention. And they wanted to give the tools to the parents and caregivers to ensure meaningful day-to-day interactions that support healthy development and minimize the risk of the placement ending. So what did they find? They found Tint. They found that Tint really met the need that they identified. So what is Tint? In a nutshell, and really a very small nutshell, but I hope to give you a flavor of it, Tint is a 7-session parenting workshop that is designed to proactively prepare parents to support their teens in managing the complex developmental tasks of adolescence by developing the youth's emotional intelligence. So it helps parents develop a set of skills that facilitates them connecting to youth when the youth is emotional, so that they can then help the child, the youth, learn about and understand emotions and ultimately increase the teen's emotional competence so they get better at handling whatever is going on in their life. Tint is evidence-based, and it's been found to do a number of things. One, it increases the parents' awareness and regulation of their own emotions and improve their emotional well-being. And you may wonder why that's important. And it's important because sort of where you came from and how you were parented impacts how you're parenting. And Tint really needs you as a parent to consider what you're bringing to the table and how you're impacting the relationship that you're having with the child that's in your care. It also helps to reduce a parent's dismissive or critical reaction to adolescent emotions. That's important because we all know how open adolescents are to dismissive and critical behavior. So it's really easy to do. Having gone through the training, I found myself catching myself all the time being dismissive or critical. So again, a really important element to focus on. It increases a parent's ability to emotion coach, to support their child when they're having tough times and rough moments and big feelings that they need to work through. And I think the very bottom line, and what's probably most important, is that it's been shown to prove a parent and adolescent's relationships and reduces conflict between them. And it also reduces emotional and behavior difficulties in adolescents. So all really good, important things, and all pieces that New Jersey, in choosing to implement Tint, were really looking for. So once the intervention was chosen, the QIC supported the implementation process, including implementation and evaluation planning, and bringing in the purveyor to provide staff training and coaching, and also developing capacity for ongoing supervision within the site.
Tools to support replication and adaptation,
So we have on the
QIC-ag.org.
next slide developed a number of materials that can help you to implement Tint if you are interested in doing that. And the first, all of these resources can be found on the website that's at the top of the slide, the QICAG.org website. The first material is an implementation video that documents New Jersey's implementation journey. And whether you want to implement Tint or not, I actually really urge you to watch the Tint video that can be found on the link on the screen. In the video, you actually hear from two parents, Sharon Johnson, who's guardian of her grandson, Donovan, as well as from Candy Bay, who is a parent that has adopted several children. And the video gives you more practical insights into Tint, including the New Jersey implementation experience, but really more important, and why I say you should watch it kind of regardless of whether you want to implement Tint, is that you will see and hear the impact that participating in Tint, and I think you can sort of extrapolate that to any program that's supportive of families, the impact that that had on families and what they so clearly gained from their experience. So that includes the impact of working with others with similar experience. If you listen, you will hear Diane Johnson say that the Tint trainer was teaching her story, and that she knew, listening to the Tint trainer, that she wasn't alone anymore. And that participating in the exercises helped them reflect on their own emotional history and how it impacts their current emotional competency and responses to their children's behavior. And lastly, the positive impact on their family dynamic that resulted from developing a practical skill set that allowed them to support their teens, right? If you talk to the team members, the facilitators, what really struck them was how parents would come back, like even after the first session, and just be so enthusiastic about how they were immediately able to implement what they had learned in the previous session. So it was very exciting and very useful, and could be immediately utilized. On our QICAG website, you can also find the results of the evaluation for Tint, an implementation manual that will help you determine if it's the right intervention for your site. It helps you consider what implementation supports and practical considerations should be contemplated when you're considering implementation of Tint, and also lessons learned by the sites during the site, New Jersey, during their implementation process, because we learned lots of awesome lessons, some of them the hard way, and we wanted to make sure that we were sharing those, sort of minimizing that experience for other folks that wanted to utilize the intervention. So these materials are available for Tint, but they're also available for all of the interventions that were implemented by our pilot sites. So again, I urge you to check it out and to shoot me an email if you have any questions, and my email address is at the bottom of the slide.
lcohen@spalding.org.
And so I am going to now turn the presentation back to Erin for Q&A.
Thank you, Leslie, and thanks to all of our presenters. I would ask all of you to come back on video. We're going to spend our remaining time with some question and answers. And as our presenters are coming back on, I just wanted to say, I hope that you all would agree that these tools that the grantees are sharing are so valuable to the work that we are doing with teens, and specifically to achieving permanency for children and youth in care. So I hope that you do kind of visit some of these links and take a look at the resources and the lessons learned by these important grant projects. So, okay, as we're going through Q&A, feel free to also continue submitting questions through the Q&A feature, and we'll get to as many as we can as time will allow. So the first question is, and this can be for any of our presenters to answer, do you have ideas or suggestions on how professionals can talk with older youth about adoption to help them to be more open to considering it? So I think this is kind of specifically talking about how do you talk about adoption with youth that might have some resistance to considering that as an option.
I'll start.
Bob Hearn.
I think it starts by not necessarily using the word adoption, but it's talking about what that youth wants. What type of people do they want to be in their life? What type of supports are they looking for? What is it that they're hoping to achieve in life, and thinking of times where people have helped them to achieve something. It's a process. It's not a one-time conversation. It's building that relationship with that youth and showing that you care about them and are invested in them as a person. And as you get to know them and what their interests are and who they are and what motivates them, then you can start to integrate those type of questions and talk about support and what their lives could be like. Now,
I would support what Bob's saying.
Debbie Riley.
Also recognize, we talked a little bit about it today, that many of the older youth have experienced a lot of disappointment and loss around what adoption means. And so there's a great deal of hesitation around thinking about it because of the failure that they've experienced around that. So I agree with Bob.
Anyone else want to answer that question?
Well, and Bob might have said this too, but I think
Don Wilson.
finding out from youth what family means to them. It means different things to different people, and I think depending on their experiences, as Debbie said, some may not have had really good experiences at all. Others, may be really, have very strong ideas of what they desire for themselves. And I think to really start where they are, that's what you have to do, is find out what it means to them. And you have to, I think, acknowledge that, the difficulties that have existed, and, that doesn't mean it always has to be that way, but you have to acknowledge it first, certainly.
Okay, next question. This, I think, is kind of along the same lines. How do you break down the barriers for teens when it comes to helping them navigate loyalty between their birth parents and the prospective adoptive parents?
I think you have to
Debbie Riley.
give space for that exact question, Erin, is that there are divided loyalties, and there's a lot of a struggle about how do you integrate, the birth family, the prospective adoptive family into their lives, and give them, I think, an understanding of what those feelings are that they have are, to really frame what we're talking about, divided loyalties. All of what we're talking about today is really, it's opening the conversation, is for all of us to feel skillful and confident and be able to talk about this. And I think that's why all these trainings are so important, because it empowers those that are listening today to be able to do that, but to give them permission that it's okay to have all of these people integrated into the fabric of who they are. I mean, it's a very intricate, beautiful tapestry, really, and we shouldn't be afraid, or they shouldn't be afraid to be able to tie those pieces together.
Don Wilson.
I also think it speaks to how important it is for us to make sure that parents and caregivers really understand this issue, that they are trained to understand that it's their job to provide this healing environment, this place where young people can be comfortable expressing their thoughts. If a child doesn't feel comfortable mentioning, their birth mother on Mother's Day, then that's not going to help things. So how can we help our foster adoptive parents to be comfortable with acknowledging that this is a part of their child's life, and they need to be open to hearing and listening and supporting their youth through this.
And I would just add to that, it starts at the front door.
Melinda Liz.
So I think anytime we talk about adoption, we have to go back to the very beginning, because you can't do all the preparation at the end. And so you have to lay that groundwork that Dawn was just talking about at the very beginning. If we are working with families as they enter the system to become foster parents, or even to become adoptive parents, if they know they want to be adoptive parents, and we don't really talk to them about the importance of family and the connections and why it's so critical for children and what it means to their identity, they're going to go into this with their own ideas of what may or may not be applicable or correct for a child or in their best interest. And so it's really important for us to ensure that at the very beginning, all the parties that are involved, not just the children, they're children, right? So all the adults around in the life need to have the right training, be on the right messaging about how this is a beautiful thing and can be a beautiful thing, as Debbie said. But it's really about all of us understanding that and making sure we train staff in that in the beginning, that we train families in that in the beginning. And then when we get to the point where we're moving into this adoption discussion, that it's not a new concept, because they've always celebrated Mother's Day. Maybe the mother comes over and hangs out with them. Maybe they go, to the zoo together, but it's not a either or, it's an and.
I agree. Adoption is addition, not subtraction, as Camilla Bunn always says.
Bob Hearn.
It's about adding people to a child and a youth's life, not about subtracting people.
Thank you. Our next question, what is one thing you would recommend to a state looking to enhance their youth engagement efforts?
Well, this might sound self-serving,
Don Wilson.
but I'm going to say if every state required their child welfare professionals to complete the NTI training, that'd be a great start, because then they would all have the same shared understanding about all of these foundational issues we're talking about, right? What does it mean to help youth understand their story? Why is that important? What is our job to support youth and parents and caregivers? And I just can tell you from folks that I've talked to over the years that we've had NTI from a pilot to today, that we have professionals who have had years and years of experience who are still learning things that are new to them through NTI. And it is, in some cases, really transforming their practice. So, I'll put a plug in for NTI for sure.
Can't you plug the other ones, Dawn?
Melinda Liz.
Sure, absolutely. But also,
I was going to say all of them.
Debbie
The
Riley.
answer is all. Check the box,
Not
all.
just
A, B, C, and D, all.
yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I would just reiterate to
Linda
that,
Liz.
I think in child welfare, we tend to be very reactive versus proactive. And that's partly because of the business we're in, and it's hard not to be. But I do think that it's really important for us to really assess what we're training staff, what we're training families at the very beginning, because if we're not giving them the tools and the information, the knowledge they need, then it's going to be very difficult to have any of these discussions: adoption, youth engagement, authentic youth engagement. So I think all of that's really important. I also would just say that there is a new youth engagement cooperative agreement that just came out. And if people are interested, stay tuned, because very soon that will be another type of quality improvement center with pilot sites that will be looking at implementing new ways to do youth engagement. So stay tuned for that.
And I would just say the start of youth engagement is time.
Bob Hearn.
And we have to give workers time to be able to establish relationships, meaningful relationships with our youth, not completing an application or a form. But time is the most precious commodity that we have. It's one of the greatest gifts that we give each other as humans. And that especially is true of our children and youth who are in care. So when counties are really looking at this, it's not just the programs, it's also about figuring out how we give our workers time to be able to spend with our youth, to truly get to know them in an authentic way. Because that's what builds trust, and that's what allows you to have these deeper, more meaningful conversations that will ultimately help our children and youth to achieve and maintain permanency.
And I would just reiterate,
Don Wilson.
I guess, emphasize too, that every decision that a child welfare worker makes, every action that they take, every interaction that they have has an impact on young people. And so I think we need to think about that, positive or negative, right? I mean, both positive and negative impacts. And so I think you need to think about, as a worker, the fact that you have a lot of power in terms of your ability to impact the life of this young person. And, to Bob's point, you need to have the time to develop that relationship. Reading a case file is not the same thing as having a conversation with a young person about what they think and feel, those kinds of things. So I would just say that as well.
I think we have time for one last question, so I want to sneak it in. What is one important lesson you have learned during your grant project? So this is kind of maybe a key takeaway that you want our audience to leave with.
I'm happy to go first. One thing I think that I learned, and I think most of our sites and our pilot learned, and that is that we don't really have enough, our workers don't have enough of an understanding about the impact of loss and grief on young people. We spend a lot of time talking about trauma, and that's important, but just understanding the loss issues and what it means to not be able to grieve those losses in a way that most of us do when someone in our families, for instance, dies, that our kids don't have that luxury often. And it can be life-changing. And so I think, we need to understand that. I think our sites said that was something they thought their workers understood, and realized through our training that maybe we had missed the mark somewhat, or they had missed the mark prior to the training.
And I would say
Melinda,
the
Liz.
importance of comprehensive training, not that it's a new thought for many of us, but just how important it is to have comprehensive training for families, to not only give them the tools that they need, but to also help them to make a informed decision at the front as to whether or not this is a journey that's best suited for them. And I think it's best noted, we have one site where I just learned from one of the foster parent mentors who said, I used to get calls that said, the child's in the middle of the street screaming, I don't know what to do. And she'd have to be in the middle of the crisis trying to figure out how to help them. And she said, now I get calls that say, the child was in the middle of the street screaming. Now the child's at home. I went over and sat with the child. We had a snack together. We talked. We went in the house. Did I do it right? And I think, to me, that's what we all want to strive, right? We don't want to have kids in the middle of the street screaming and parents don't know what to do, no matter what age they are. So we want to make sure that we give them the comprehensive tools so that they know how to get the child off the street, do it the right way, and bring the child in to enhance their relationship and attachments.
And I'll just add a little bit to that from the QIC perspective.
Leslie
I think
Cohen.
it's really important to develop and maintain connections with families even after permanence has been achieved, because discontinuity is highest about 10 years after the permanence has been achieved. And if we want families to seek support, we need to make sure, one, that they know their supports, and we need to make sure that they're comfortable coming back and asking for assistance if they need it. And that isn't going to be done if 10 years have passed since they've heard from anybody in the child welfare system. One, they probably won't be up on what's available to them, and they certainly aren't going to feel like calling back in, especially since so many of them may not have left with the most positive feelings. We really want to make sure we're cultivating those relationships and empowering those families to seek support when they need it.
And I'd say
Bob Hearn.
from the work at Adopt US Kids, the National Speakers Bureau, I knew the impact it had on potential foster families and adoptive families. And I knew the impact that it had for youth who were in the foster care system to hear from other youth. I was shocked about the benefits that it provided to our youth and families by being a member of the Speakers Bureau, and how much they were getting out of it, and how important those relationships were, and how it strengthened their relationship with their families because it allowed them to have those conversations. So that those are just unexpected benefits that I was surprised about how impactful they've been.
Visit the 2021 National Adoption Month website for more information.
Thank you again to all of our presenters, and thank you to all of our attendees for joining us for today's webinar. We have put various resources in the chat, but please make sure that you kind of seek out more information using the handout that we provided or on the National Adoption Month website. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Child Welfare Information Gateway. We will be following up by email as well. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great rest of the week.